This video is a build video slash review of my home server system, which I'm building up using a Sliger CX3170a XL server case with their rack rails. I can see one of the changes that they've made from some earlier models that I've seen reviews of on YouTube is they started packaging the rails inside the box, which was pretty nice since everything arrived safely intact. No complaints about the packaging at all. So I decided to go with this one over like a Rosewell, some of the Amazon cases. By the time you add up shipping, they're almost as much. This one's made in Colorado, which was a benefit. I really like the hexagon grid on the front. Looks cool, and it seems to just be a simple design that's really smart. I'm using a Dell drive shelf, Dell SC200, which I'll see later in the video, so I don't need hot swap bays on this. Just my two drives for Proxmox. They provide lots of hardware here. Those are the rack ears, but plenty of standoffs. I think enough hardware that you won't need to install any others. So that was a nice touch. They have a nice powder coat finish on all the components as well. So it does require SFX power supply. I had this Corsair SF750 years ago that I ended up never using. I was going to build a ITX Steam PC, but never ended up doing it, got laid off. So finally able to use it 2 years later on my home server build, which I wasn't really expecting. But yeah, it's an interesting choice how they laid this out. The fan for the SFX power supply is actually pointing the opposite way that normally you would expect. I guess it should work fine. There's some ventilation on the sides there. I chose right here to install these two Intel SSDs. So with these Intel SSDs, these are actually from my used pile. I bought these over 10 years ago when Intel first started pushing SSDs in the consumer market. I've used them in two different systems previously. Just stopped using them a few years ago. These are over 10 years old, used almost every day. They still show over 96% capacity left, so I think it's a good testament to how reliable these drives have been. And I'm going to use them in Proxmox now in a RAID 1, is that correct? Well, they're in a mirror, so they're a mirrored installation, so one drive can still fail. So I expect to get several more years out of these. These are some Arctic P12 Pro fans. I'll have the link in the description from Amazon for these, but just the cheapest. I'm really happy. I mean, these aren't going to be sitting next to me. They're going to be installed in a utility room between my furnace and my water heater, basically, in a rack. So I wasn't too worried about noise. These are the 3000 RPM varieties, and these are doubling as my CPU fans. So I didn't want a 1500 RPM Noctua here. I want something with a full 3000 RPM capacity. But I've been using these in my right next to me. Right now I've been setting up Proxmox. I have zero complaints about the noise, but part of that is because I still have the stock fans in my Dell Compellent drive array, which are full on 80mm server fans, and they totally drown this out. So until I get those replaced with a quieter fan, these are basically inaudible. But one thing I should mention here is I ended up disassembling the entire front of the case, which you don't have to do. The front of the case just pops right off. They have some really clever snaps for the front grille that just pop right off. I didn't want to break anything, but you can just yank it right off and things will be fine. So it's really easy to change the filter there, to wash out the filter periodically. This just snaps right on like that. So save some time. Hopefully this saves someone some time, and you can just snap that part off instead of trying to disassemble the case like I did. So other than the power supply and case and fans, everything else in the system is used. So what I went with for a motherboard was a SuperMicro X11 DPL-I. So that's a socket 3267. So I already had the CPUs installed here. I went with two Intel Xeon Gold 20-core processors, which I got off eBay for $9 each. Actually, the memory for this system cost more than the CPUs and motherboard combined with what the current RAMageddon situation. I ended up paying $240 for 64 gig of DDR4. I'll include a slide at the end of this video and also in the description of all the components that I use with links to them. One thing about this motherboard is it's an ATX motherboard, and this case actually has space for even bigger than that, up to eATX. So as far as the PCI slots go, this case supports up to 8, and my board has 6. So the first one is covered up and actually blocks a ID button that's used for IPMI. One of the things that's new to me with this case, I've never had a server system before with IPMI, and when I worked with them in industry, it was something that I always ignored. It's always from the kernel engineering side that I've worked with server, never like the IT side of things, unless it's cloud where I never see them. So that's been kind of cool, being able to manage the SuperMicro system remotely. I went with 64 gig of used DDR4 2666, which is the fastest speed supported by this generation of processor for ECC memory. I was a little concerned about it, but I think looking at how small the VMs that I'm running are in containers, this seems to be plenty. I could probably actually expand the amount of ZFS cache that I'm using right now in RAM. Proxmox only uses 10% of RAM, which is a lot different from TrueNAS Scale, which I was using before, which allows basically using all of the system RAM for ZFS cache. One of the things I did do, because RAM was so expensive, is I purchased an Optane drive, which I've been really happy with. I've been using it as L2 ARC with ZFS. So it's a 480 gig Optane drive, which I purchased for less than the cost of this 240 gig of RAM, or 64 gig of RAM. So I paid $240 for the RAM in January 2026 prices, where the Optane was $160 for 480 gig. So basically 10 times cheaper per gig. So I have it set up primarily right now as a swap file if I run into memory pressure, like if I'm trying to run, say, a large LLM that takes up most of memory space. And the rest of it's for basically L2 cache or ZFS. So right now I've been running it ZFS cache with my disk array. Oh, well, right here you can see one of the things with this SuperMicro case is it has a slot with this motherboard, which is right next to the RAM, so it'll only take a very short card. One thing I did see is SuperMicro makes a 10 gig network adapter, which fits in that slot perfectly. So I ordered one of those, so I'm going to upgrade my switch network to have a 10 gig SFP plus direct connect to my switch. So this motherboard only has two 1 gig ports, which I'm also going to use for more like upstream internet traffic, and then my local file share is going to be connected over the SFP plus port, so I have dedicated 10 gig basically for my local network for any local storage I want to access. Anyway, with this Optane drive, I wanted to say I've been getting 50% cache hits on the L2 ARC connected to spinning Rust disks. So I've been really happy with the performance, and only about 600 megabytes overhead in RAM in order to run it. So that's something I've been happy with. Well, at least it posts. After 10 minutes or so of trying, well, more like an hour, I was finally able to get into BIOS on this. I'm not sure what the issue was. I took out my Optane drive. Normally, this is the reason I normally like to not add everything all at once. Sometimes it works, but in this case, I had to pull out my RAID controller, my SAS controller. It started booting after that. I had problems with this. I also disconnected all my Intel USB drives, or USB or SSDs. So basically all the storage drives. There's no storage on this. But then I was able to at least finally get into the BIOS menu, so I can see my CPUs here, so that's good. I'm not going to change any of these. See if I can even see my memory here. Was another concern was whether my memory was all working. These are all used parts. I'll see if there's a more recent BIOS than this, 2.1, 6.5, 2018. That could be some of my issues. Secure boot disabled, that's good. CSM support I probably want to disable. I'll leave it on for now. A lot of boot options, that's unusual. I've never seen that. So I'll just leave on UEFI for now. Less things to worry about. Yeah, I guess next I'm going to try and update the BIOS on this, see if that helps. It'd be nice if I had was able to get some info on here, but apparently not. Memory topology, oh, okay, there's my memory. all 64 gigs of it. So at least I'm good there. Yeah, I guess next step, see if I can update the BIOS and start installing Proxmox maybe. It's too bad. I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on with my controller. I'm wondering if possibly this doesn't have the right firmware on it. It could also be it has a legacy boot option on there, a legacy RAID controller, and since it could be a legacy boot option was getting tripped up on there. Maybe if I just have it on UEFI mode, that'll fix the issues. Anyway, I'm gonna keep working on it. So getting into the flash here, found there was a quite a bit newer flash update available from, it looked like it's posted July of last year by one of the Intel IPU updates. Yeah, things going good now. I think possibly what did it is I got a full CMOS clear, but I'm going to start adding cards back in. All my memory shows up. We'll see if this BIOS update worked okay. So the BIOS update's actually a little tricky on these SuperMicros. You got to go into UEFI, run your flash.nsh with this. And it doesn't actually complete it the first time you do it. It creates a startup.nsh file, which then runs it again. This is actually the second time it's rebooting. And in the instructions, they say you need to power cycle after finishing it. So it's not quite as cut and dry as a lot of consumer motherboards, where you just flash it, it does all the reboots and everything on its own. But I rebooted once and saw it was still the same BIOS version. Now it really does look like it's doing a complete update. So we'll see if this takes. Yeah, so it finished up. They say you have to power off for the changes to take effect. So apparently they don't load everything. I'm going to say press any key to reset. I'll go ahead and power cycle it the way they say to. See if it lets me in this time. Yes, so I did get 728.25, so it did update this time. Anyway, I'll go through here and set everything back up on UEFI and get started with Proxmox. Yeah, so it seems I have a bit of a mystery why I cannot get the system to boot, because right now I'm into BIOS have all my memory installed, both CPUs, both boot devices connected, my Optane drive there, my HP SAS, and it appears to be fine. I don't know. I'll have to start installing. But just one of those mystery system building things where that first time I don't see any anything installed. Not able to post, not able to get into the BIOS. First time building a system. Then take things apart, put them back together, clear CMOS, and it comes up. I'm thinking it could have been something in CMOS, or could have been something with having legacy boot enabled instead of just UEFI, but it looks like things are good to go now with all my devices. Before I did any installation, I wanted to make sure that the cable management was cleaned up. I had a bit of a rat's nest here, so you can see from first assembling it after putting everything together, and I didn't want any additional air resistance in front of the fan, since that's the only thing that's cooling things down. I know a lot of people aren't fans of zip ties. That's probably what I had. I have a cable management kit that I got off Amazon that I have a link in the description for, with a bunch of zip ties as well as some Velcro wraps. So I used both for this. You can see there's a spline going down the case that Sliger put in there, which works pretty well for aligning all the cables here. So I tied essentially all the USB cables and fan cables together with an offshoot for the fans to connect just with the straight run. So it's pretty clean by the end of this. As far as the previous clip went, I do think the reason why I was having problems booting up initially, which I cut out the footage of it, but I spent about an hour not being able to get into BIOS. I think it was probably just CMOS, so I think that's pretty important with a new motherboard when you don't know what processor was installed in it previously. It's just doing a CMOS clear. So I did do remove the battery, put it back in, but there's also 2 points. It's not even a jumper, but just 2 contact points on the motherboard that you need to bridge to clear CMOS. So the first time I had just removed the battery and went in and still wasn't able to get into BIOS. When I removed the battery, then bridged those 2 points on the motherboard, then booted up, it was fine. And I removed all my devices by that point, so that wasted a lot of time. Normally the way I build systems is, put the processors in, put in normally 1 stick of memory, but 2 in this case. So each processor has one, so that doesn't create any problems. And try to at least get into BIOS doing that, and I think that would have saved me a lot of time trying to boot this thing up versus installing everything, then removing it all, then clearing CMOS. Because also under my Optane card right now is where the CMOS battery and jumper is. So yeah, that just wasted a lot of time versus clearing CMOS. Probably do the BIOS update then after that's all done, and then start fresh, especially with these used boards where who knows what type of setup they had in here. these are the rack rails that I ordered with the Sliger case. Something that you want to be aware of if you watch some other video reviews of these rails or cases is they've made some changes to these since those videos, which are a year or two old, were posted. Notably, they changed the nuts which fit into the rack. So I was pretty confused after watching some of the older videos and then looking at the mounting hardware. The first thing that I thought is maybe I was missing some pieces, but they actually changed the system, so it's a single bolt here that fits in to the rack, and I actually prefer it quite a bit to the revision in the previous videos that were posted a year or two ago. So one thing I'd recommend is go on Sliger's website, and they have some instructions on how to put these together. I was pretty confused when I first looked at all the parts in here, because you've got the rails themselves, then you've got these rear brackets for different size, different depth racks. So the one thing that's nice about these is they give you the parts, so whether your rack is, I think the minimum is 19 inches deep, up to something like 30 inches deep. So mine is 24, so kind of in the middle. And I was able to use the shortest set. So I think these will probably work up to a full depth server rack if you wanted to. So here's the installation of the actual rails themselves. So the first part of it is they give these clamps which go on the front side of your rack for the slides, and these just screw in with these little black bolts that they give you. So there's not, an extra nut that goes in, and you just put them on finger tight, and then the front side of the rails slides in between the rack rails and this rear brace, and kind of just slots right in there. I think the quality of the hardware is good enough, or I wasn't worried about lightly using an impact here to get things tightened up, so that sped up assembly a bit. Then I was able to use the shortest rails here, so again, they just slide over the back side of the rail once it's mounted, and then you bolt them in with the same nuts that they give you in the kit. They also give plenty of extras here, so there's no concern about running out or missing a piece. This is the final part of assembling the rack rails, just installing two support bolt and nut through the brace which holds the slide to the back of the rack. So overall I thought these were pretty easy to install. It's kind of intimidating when you take them apart just because of the number of parts they have for different sizes of racks, but once you realize that you only need 3 of those parts for each side, it's pretty easy to deal with. I do like these rails quite a bit. They don't have ball bearings, but when you think about it, like what you do with the server, you're not sliding these out multiple times a day like you would in a kitchen or a shop. And having the extra friction is nice. If you slide it out and need to work on it, that it's not going to roll back and forth, that it kind of stays where you pull it. So then the last part is pulling out the rails here to install them on the chassis. So right here I'm just screwing the inner part of the slides to the Sliger case. I actually made a mistake here where I installed, there's a lot of mounting holes you can see in the rail here and also on the chassis as well, which gives you quite a bit of adjustment. But for these rails in particular, you want the inner slides. I would recommend installing the rack ears first and then installing the rails second. So I actually had to reposition these because the slides, the chassis, when I'd slide it in, it wouldn't go all the way into the slide so that I could screw it into the rack rails. So you see there's about an inch gap here between where the rail is and the rack ear mounts. That needs to be shifted forward by almost an inch so they're almost touching. And then everything lines up and the chassis will go all the way back in the rack. So I'll go ahead and include the clip that shows what happens if it's not installed correctly. That was, I think, the one mistake I had putting this thing together. So here's how it fits after I readjusted, moved the position of the rails so that it fits all the way back in the rack now. And then in that case it's almost perfect. So then you can just take some of the included, this is from my Vivor rack. I had the rack nuts as well as some bolts, some metric, I think they're M5. To be able to just screw it into the chassis so it doesn't slide out. So here it is, the Sliger case mounted up with my Dell Compellent storage array. I picked this guy up on eBay for basically the cost of the drives, and that would be less than $20 for each 4 terabyte drive. So I got 12 times 4, 48 terabytes hard disk. And I'm going to fill this out as I find drives. I'm just finding these 1.92 terabyte enterprise SSDs. Starting with just 3, setting up an RAID Z1 configuration to start with. But yeah, here's how it mounts up. And I'm going to work on, see if I can CNC or 3D print an IO shield for the back here. Probably similar design. I want to have some airflow going through still, through these heat sinks through the back, but still have something where it's not just open, especially around the VGA port. So maybe I'll even just have a cutout around this heat sink here. So that's fully exposed and it is cooling whatever those components are there. Some VRMs or something. One of the things I did not complete when I was assembling the case was attaching the cable for this USB-C port. Because the internal cable is for a Type E, and we have the old style USB 2 header, and then there's a USB 4 header inside here. The Sliger rack rails do make it pretty easy to slide things out. Work on the system. No complaints there. They aren't ball bearing, but I kind of like that they have some friction to them. And if you think about it, like this is type of thing you're going to use, slide out. It's not like a shop or a kitchen where you're going to use them multiple times a day. It's multiple times a month at most. So yeah, this is the guy right here. I already bought Type B cable. I bought this adapter, but it's right angle. So the issue is when it's the only way it installs, it interferes with my card. Unfortunately, on Amazon, they don't have a straight connector. I don't know why I would want this right angle adapter, but all of them are right angle adapters. So I had to buy an additional. It's a janky setup. But hopefully this is going to work over 3 cables. The other thing I didn't like, well, it doesn't work with my motherboard. Let's see if this works. Is there's a ID pin here, right over the top PCI slot cover. And I don't know if this is because, so I drilled a hole for it, but it doesn't work very well. There's a little button here for IDing the console with IPMI, but I don't want the slot interfering with it. Also, this is blocked off completely, and I want to make sure that there's free airflow across the RAM here and across the side of the CPU. This is kind of something I wish Sliger would make with the cases. But I bought these Silverstone ones. See if these work and don't interfere. I would say that still interferes with the button, but at least I'm getting some airflow through there. But it would be nice if they had some vented slot covers, at least to buy extra that matches either the front mesh or the stamp outs here. Maybe include some. Steel press them out. I mean, it would be nice to have, there's enough space in one of these to have the same grid pattern. Now, I am finding these 1U coolers, with the way this case is set up, it's fine at idle, but if you try to run anything that's at all CPU intensive, I tried running just 20 threads of Monero XMR mining on it. 32 threads, so on one core, but it gets up to the point where the SuperMicro alarms start going off, get IPMI warnings, all that. So I think I'm gonna go with, I thought about doing I'm gonna do a fan shroud anyway. I'd like to direct some of the airflow over the RAM, but also I think I just need more metal, a beefier heat sink. So I'm going to go with, I think, try to get a 3U heat sink because that's the biggest that will fit. Try to go passive with that. I thought about 3D printing a fan shroud to direct the air down and over these. I'm worried that even if I do that, I'm going to waste all the material and it's still not going to be enough, and that's a lot of time to sink in. Whereas I could just do buy a 2U or a 3U heat sink and then do the shroud and know I'm going to have something that's optimal. These are only 125 TDP processors. They're the Xeon Gold 6138. The max for this motherboard is 140 watts TDP, I believe. So I'm close to that. There are some 140 that I may upgrade to in the future. Some of the Xeon Platinum 24 core. For right now, this is way more than what I'm using or what I need. But yeah, hopefully just having a little more airflow here helps a little with the cooling. So I think right now the passive least resistance is through this side, so core 2 is probably not getting as much cooling. Like, this is all the heat generating components right here. I'm gonna try this by for running just standard home server tasks, like it's fine. But I mean, it's still 40-50 C just at idle with these two. So I think I'm gonna want to upgrade. I mean, I'm gonna want to be able to at least run. In the past, I've run various simulations that may take 24 hours overnight runs. So I want something that's going to do that without getting IPMI alarms where the thing's just beeping like crazy. But that's pretty much it for the Sliger case build. I'm really happy with the case. I think one other thing, I'm using two drives right now for Proxmox. I really don't need this. I think it's a clean setup just to have them at the back here. I mean, you think about it, like if a drive fails, you just pull it back this far, pull it straight out back. I mean, if you have space at the back of the rack, you can even do it without removing the rack from the case. But I mean, that would be enough. And with the cables run through here, I really don't have a lot of space for other drives. Like, I'm sure if I managed a little more carefully, I could pack the cables back here. But pretty happy with this setup overall for Proxmox.